At a stroke, the 600 takes Fiat from nowhere to credible contention in the supermini B segment. At first glance, it's a rather pretty supersized 500. Actually, it's a reskinned Jeep Avenger, but what's important is that the end result is very appealing indeed.
So, the Fiat 600, you can have this either as a hybrid or in the electric form we try here, the 600e, which is the brand's first 5-door EV. Either way, it could hardly be more important. Lots of effort went into its development, specifically a team of 250 engineers in Turin put in over 1 million working hours over 2 years to create this car, which arrived at the end of 2023, just as the brand's slightly larger hatch, the Tipo, left the showrooms, and another similarly sized model, the 500X crossover, neared the end of production. Actually though, the 600, which is named after the brand's classic 600 Seicento model of 1955, isn't really a replacement for either of those two models. Instead, it marks a return by the company to the slightly more compact-sized supermini sector, once Fiat's heartland, but rather incredibly, a segment in which the company hasn't offered a car since the Punto was pensioned off in 2018. It's yet another attempt by this Italian brand to supersize the attributes of their little 500 city car to try to keep families who've outgrown that model in the Fiat fold. Now, the last time the marque tried that with the weird-looking 500L small MPV of 2012, the result wasn't entirely successful, but this does look a much better effort. Under the skin, almost everything, most notably the eCMP2 chassis, is shared with a close Stellantis Group cousin model, the Jeep Avenger. The 600 is even built alongside that car in a Polish factory at Tychy, about an hour's drive west of Krakow. But where the Avenger trades on bluff crossover cues, the 600 wants to replicate some of the fashionable urban cuteness that's made the Fiat 500 such a bestseller. So for the first time since the 70s, your local Fiat showroom can offer you both a 500 and a 600 model. But will this pretty 5-door interpretation of a successful Latin recipe strike a chord here? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, of course the car and driving road test, to find that out. The cuddly looks lead you to expect a Fiat 500 feel inside, but if you're familiar with that car, despite various linking cues here, it won't feel especially like that once you get behind the wheel, which is something of a harbinger of what's to come. Coloured graphics decorate the screens in front of you as you get comfortable and press the start button, which in this EV version responds with a chime, the usual muted words ahead of you, and an instrument screen that springs to life with a green ready signal. You are ready, but for what? Well, not particularly arresting acceleration in this 600e, which you realise after a bit is down to the fact that the kind of rapid forward thrust that you expect from an EV is limited to the top sport mode that you have to manually select to get the powertrain's full claimed 154 bhp power output. Otherwise, in the default normal setting or the frugal eco mode, you're limited to a much lower figure of 107 bhp, which isn't a lot to push along nearly 1.6 tons of Polish assembled, Turin designed Latin real estate. Rather less encumbered is the alternative hybrid version of this car, which you're going to get to quite shortly. To start with though, we'll focus on the 600e EV variant we've been given to try here, which originally was the only version of this model that Fiat was going to sell here before the EV market of course faltered and Turin had a rethink. It is a touch ironic that a car which looks so individual is so derivative under the skin. Beneath this curvy panelwork, almost everything of consequence is shared with another significant, similarly sized Stellantis Group compact EV crossover, and that of course is the Jeep Avenger, which means the same eCMP2 architecture and the same 54 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which energizes a 154 bhp electric motor on the front axle axle, which can propel the car to 62 miles an hour in 9 seconds, but tails off as you approach the modest top speed of just 93 miles an hour. There are no steering wheel brake regeneration paddles, just a B gear selection, which slightly increases energy scavenging, but not by enough to facilitate the kind of one pedal driving that is championed by some rivals. This is what Stellantis calls its long-range battery pack. You have to pay extra for it with comparable Peugeot, Citroën and Vauxhall electric models, but its 254-mile range still isn't exceptional by class standards, given that a smart #1 goes 260 miles and a cheaper MG4 long range goes up to 284 miles or up to 323 miles in extended range form. As with all EVs, the range of this Fiat rises considerably if you're engaged in just town travel, up to a claimed 375 miles in this case, although we can't imagine ever getting close to that based on the span of only just over 200 miles that we've been getting between charging over mixed motoring with this test. Given that today's breed of EV superminis list at roughly twice the price of their combustion engine counterparts from just a few years ago, you'd hope for more, really. Has a step forward really been taken with this market's new electric zeitgeist? Well, we've yet to be convinced on that in an era when the younger people and the service industry employees, which would once have been target market for a car of this size, are being just priced out of ownership. Perhaps help is at hand though in the form of the fossil-fueled 600 hybrid variant we referenced earlier on. Although it are still hardly inexpensive, the 20% saving it offers over this EV at least brings that car closer to the realms of affordability, well on finance anyway, for its target market. The 1.2 litre 48 volt hybrid powertrain that it uses features here in that lesser 100 horsepower form that the Stellantis group reserves for its really small cars. It's still a clever setup though. The 3-cylinder petrol unit works via a 6-speed dual clutch automatic gearbox, and the casing houses the powertrain's DC inverter, its engine control unit and a little 28 horsepower electric motor powered by a tiny battery that's secreted beneath the front passenger seat. On the move in a 600 hybrid, the petrol engine and the electric motor can operate together or they can operate separately. And unlike with a mild hybrid system, say the one fitted to a Hyundai i20 Supermini, here the car can be driven for short urban distances under 18 miles an hour on electric power alone. The motor also assists the engine under acceleration, such as from standstill to 62 miles an hour, which takes 10.9 seconds. During deceleration, the petrol engine stops and the e-motor acts as a generator to recharge the hybrid system's 48 volt battery. The battery also stores the energy recuperated by the regenerative braking system in enough quantity, it is claimed, to power the car for up to 50% of the time in urban travel, as well as for low-speed manoeuvring, reversing and the engine stop-start system. In theory, there's less pulling power than you'll get in the EV, 205 Newton meters versus 250, but that's based on a 600e using all its power, which, as I mentioned earlier on, that electric model's drive modes rarely allow you to do. Whatever flavour of powertrain you decide on for your 600, you'll need to manage your expectations if you come to this car expecting it to feel like some kind of Fiat 500, or, which is less likely, the agile, direct, small Uno and Punto Superminis that Turin was making at the turn of the century. Sadly, the Italian brand has long stopped making 5-door models like that, and this one has moved really so far towards the softly sprung, comfort-oriented end of the spectrum that it really reminds us more of a small Citroën than that unlamented third-generation Punto model that it's theoretically supposed to have replaced. We don't necessarily have a problem with that. In fact, the supple ride here is well suited to our nation's often terrible tarmac, and it copes well with the speed humps and the potholes of urban travel. But whereas in this segment, say, Volkswagen Polo manages to deliver much of that kind of supple demeanour without undue roll and pitch at speed through the bends, this Fiat really achieves a rather less successful balance when things all speed up and the road gets all twisty. It doesn't wallow about, or it doesn't roll quite as much as, say, a Citroën C3 might, but there's no incentive to push along and even enjoy yourself at the wheel of a 600, and that's not helped either by the rather lifeless steering feedback. Creating a performance hot hatch from this rather sweet trolley-like confection, as Fiat's performance brand Abarth has to do with the Abarth 600e version of this car, well, that might be something of a challenge. But there are compensations. Refinement may not be class leading, but of course it's in another world from Fiat Superminis of the past, which makes this a car better suited for longer journeys should this 600e model's range allow to actually make them. On a trip like that, you might appreciate the level 2 assisted drive tech that's been built into this plusher La Prima spec, and that keeps you automatically in your chosen lane, providing you keep your hands on the wheel at all times. At the same time, adaptive cruise control can brake or accelerate in response to vehicles all around you. Blind spot detection uses ultrasonic sensors to monitor blind spots and warns of any obstacles with warning lights on the wing mirror, and an intelligent speed assist system reads out the speed limits to you and can automatically apply them, so it's all very on trend, which is what this 600 wants to be. You'd have to be seeking that and appreciate its softly sprung demeanour to want one, but if you do, well, there's a lot to like here. Is this the most eye-catching mainstream brand small hatch that money can buy? Well, for us, this Fiat certainly vies with the Peugeot 208 for that title, although some shopping in this segment might prefer the rather less feminine style of, say, a Mini Cooper or a Volvo EX30. What's not in doubt, though, is that this is a far more effective attempt to supersize the visual values of the little Fiat 500 city car than its predecessor, the 500L. Mind you, this 600 is quite a lot smaller than one of those, so its job in that respect was rather easier. The 417 centimetre length, just 10 centimetres longer than the Punto Supermini of old, and it's 10 centimetres shorter than Fiat's old 500X crossover. Overall, the dimensions are pretty much identical to the Stellantis group model that this 600 shares most with, the Jeep Avenger, which is what you expect, as those two cars share the same eCMP2 platform. The size of this Fiat is somewhat deceptive until you see it in the metal. In pictures it appears almost family hatch shape, but get up close and personal, it's very much a B segment supermini from the next category down. At least it's not trying to be some kind of SUV, or at least you might think that until you see these black plastic clad wheel arches, which at the rear have these neat little aero spats and house rims which vary in size between 16 or, as in this case, 18 inches. Those wheels are 600 branded, as are the prominent black lower side sills there. Where you more easily recognise the Fiat 500 electric parentage is here at the front, particularly with these pretty eyelid style colour coordinated panels on the LED reflector headlights, below which sit the curved kiss-shaped daytime running lights, which this Italian brand has rather made their own. Beady little round LED fog lights sit further down either side of this intricately shaped latticed lower intake. As with the smaller model, there's no brand badge on the nose. The twin creased bonnet flows down into this 600 badge with further 600 references flowing out of the headlights. The rear view is reminiscent of the 500X, but it has more sophisticated silver detailed LED tail lamps. There's a 600 branded lower bumper strip, a dinky little rear wiper, a black roof spoiler and a shark fin antenna just beyond. Arguably more interesting is just how light Fiat's managed to make this car, under 1,600 kilos in this top 600e form, which is pretty light for a small EV. A rival Smart #1, for example, is a full 300 kilos heavier. Time to take a look inside, with unlocking activated by this rather disappointingly Peugeot-like chunky key. A car key is such a potentially personal thing, you'd think Fiat would be allowed by Stellantis to design its own. Anyway, will the cabin be as cute and trendy as the exterior? Would you want it to be? Well, seated at the wheel here, it's much easier to convince yourself that you're at the wheel of something 500 derived until you take a look over your shoulder anyway. The bold 600 badge here on the steering wheel boss, the gear shift buttons down there, and the colour coordinated mid-level long oval shaped fascia panel are all cues from the 500e, but actually the cabin architecture, rather like the rest of the car's engineering actually, is Jeep Avenger sourced. Now in some ways that's good. It certainly means you avoid the cramped cabin feel of that smaller Fiat, and unlike in a 500 you get separate physical climate controls rather than having to fish around through menus on the central touchscreen. Build integrity from the Polish factory is okay, which means it's pretty good for a small Fiat, but the quality of the materials used around this interior really is nothing to write home about, and it's some way off what you get from a rival Smart #1, which is only slightly more expensive. The plastic used on this Dua door card looks especially cheap. What might sell you on a 600 in the showroom though are the fashionable little touches like this lovely variant branded magnetic folding panel on the center tunnel here, and the intricately stitched seats of this top La Prima version. They're upholstered in a recycled material which is presumably supposed to resemble leather but feels nothing like it. The vegan stitched material around the steering wheel is rather better in that respect. The wheel, like the center stack, is festooned with little buttons. Fiat doesn't seem to have got the memo regarding the current trend for decluttered fascias. Other nice touches include the sliding center armrest here and those little round speakers built into the A-pillars. As with Volkswagen Group EV models, the Italian brand doesn't see the need for large instrument cluster screens. This one's 7 inches in size, but it's much more clearly laid out than the displays you tend to get in the current wave of Chinese EVs. It's dominated by a digital speedo above a drive assist graphic and flanked by speed limit and gear selection readouts. At the top of the screen is a tiny charge eco power meter you'll probably never look at, and on this 600e, central along the display's bottom frame is a battery charge meter flanked by range and percentage readouts and an odometer. The 10.25-inch Uconnect central touchscreen is borrowed not only from the Avenger, but from a whole range of current Stellantis Group models, and that means it's one of those that's rather fiddly to find a home screen with, or a wide range of radio stations as well. As is the current media fashion, it works via customizable widgets for the features that you use most frequently. You swipe left for a nav map and then further left for more widgets, and that includes what the developers have decided to call an application drawer. Now in this are housed all kinds of features that you wouldn't really call apps. This includes the electric section that you'll need for setting your charging times or for viewing your consumption statistics. There are games too. There's Tic-Tac-Toe, there's Hangman and 2048. And rather more usefully, there's wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring for those times you get really tired of listening to the rather limited audio system, which only has 6 speakers even in this top La Prima model. Over-the-air updates, they're built in, but the voice control system, that's not particularly intuitive. You access that with the command, "Hey Fiat." What else? Well, the seats aren't massively supportive, but for all but the lengthiest of trips, they should prove quite comfortable. Well, in this top La Prima model anyway, which for the driver comes with a range of niceties you might not expect at this price point. There's power adjustment here, there's lumbar support, and they're heated with a massaging function too. You don't, of course, get the slightly more commanding driving position you'd perhaps enjoy if you'd spent just a little more on a small SUV of this sort, but your frontward visibility is fine. Your rearward view, though, is rather compromised by the substantial rear C-pillars, so you'll have need of the rear parking sensors, and on a base model, you might wish you had the rear view camera that you do get on this higher spec La Prima version. Various handy cabin storage compartments collectively offer 15 litres of storage space, which would be a lot more if the glove box wasn't halved in size by the fuse box. It's another thing that Fiats weren't saddled with in the days when they weren't based on so many shared underpinnings. Still, there are plenty of other places for your odds and ends. The neat centre tunnel compartment we mentioned earlier has a wireless charging mat and a 12-volt socket too. So with the folding lid closed, you can charge things out of the sight of prying eyes. Between the seats here is a deep bin with a cup holder, and another deep lidded bin resides behind. Plus you get ticket clips in the sun visors, and you also get reasonably shaped door pockets. Time to take a look in the rear. Now, Fiat says its engineers focus quite a lot on rear seat occupant space, making access to the back easier by creating a door ring which is 37mm wider. As a result, there is indeed a slightly wider entry aperture than is common with this class of car, which should make leaning in to strap in youngsters to child seats just a bit more straightforward. And once you're inside, well, Fiat says that legroom and roominess in the back has been maximised here, and that's by moving the design's fundamental H points, and that apparently allowed for a gain of an extra 30mm of legroom. Be that as it may, this does still feel like a car at the smaller end of the supermini size scale. There's really not that much legroom at all, and as an adult you're really going to be particularly pinched on knee space if the folk ahead of you happen to be long-legged. Obviously expectations in this regard really can't be too unreasonable from a car in this class, but combustion rivals like Skoda's Scala show that much more is possible from a B segment hatch, while if you're considering an EV, a competing Smart #1 has the useful sliding bench base that Fiat hasn't been able to build in here. An only slightly smaller EV like Hyundai's Kona Electric has a reclining rear backrest. That's another thing missing from this 600. But let's look at what we do have here. Doesn't help that the window line is so high. That might make some children feel a touch claustrophobic on your longer trips. Plus you have to do without door bins, and the headrests are of the sort that uncomfortably dig into your back until you raise them up. You wouldn't expect an armrest in a super mini class car, and you don't get one here. What you might expect though in such a front driven and EV orientated model is a lower centre tunnel than this one. As it is, a third adult is going to really struggle, especially given this lowered middle bulge in the ceiling height here. Overhead grab handles are missing too, but you do at least get seat back pockets on both sides here. Let's finish as usual with a look in the boot, which on this EV is the only place that you'll have to store luggage because the ECM P2 platform doesn't allow for an underbonnet frunk. Now you get a powered tailgate on this La Prima model, and once it raises with either drivetrain, a 360 litre space is revealed, 5 litres more than the Jeep Avenger, which is about average for the class, and it's double what you'll get in a 500e. Unfortunately, this adjustable height boot floor here, which reduces the lip at the boot entrance and makes it much easier to heave in heavy items. That's another feature which is limited to the pricier La Prima models. So if you've chosen the base EV model, your charging leads are going to be sliding all around the boot floor every time you go around a bend, and that's because there isn't any room for them in the tiny space below the cargo base, where there's certainly not space for anything other than a tyre repair kit. There's a broad square aperture here at the boot. Fiat doesn't seem to agree though with the idea of tie-down points because they are absent, but there are bag hooks on both sides and there's a light on the left. Now, as usual with this class of car, you get neither a ski hatch nor a 40-20-40 folding bench, but if you push forward the 60-40 split backrest, up to 1,231 litres of almost flat space is revealed. From launch and at the time of this test in summer 2024, 600 pricing started from around £24,000. That's what you need for the hybrid version of this car with base trim. £3,000 more gets you a 600 hybrid in plush La Prima trim. For this all-electric 600e, the official starting price is around £33,000 for the base red version and £37,000 for the plusher La Prima variant we have here. But as we filmed, Fiat was offering a so-called e-grant of £3,000 off both those prices as part of an offer that had no scheduled end date. So for the time being, fairly safe to think of a £30,000 starting price point if you want this car as an EV. That's about £2,000 more than the brand's little three-door 500e. Now, Fiat isn't offering that substantial e-grant price cut just to be philanthropic. It's aware that EV sales have stalled and that competitors are offering similar deals. At the time of filming, for example, the EV supermini sales leader, that's Vauxhall's Corsa, that could be had for under £27,000, although you'll need around £32,000 for the other similarly engineered Stellantis Group EV supermini, the Peugeot E208. But that doesn't tell the whole story. The figures just quoted for the Corsa Electric and for the E208 are for versions with the conglomerate's older, shorter range 50 kilowatt-hour battery, which takes those cars just 211 miles between charges. All Fiat 600e models are fitted with the group's newer long-range 54 kilowatt-hour battery, which is paired with a gutsier electric motor and boosts range up to a much more acceptable 254 miles between charges. A Corsa Electric with the newer battery would cost over £35,000, and an E208 with the 54 kilowatt-hour battery costs over £36,000. Now this Fiat is starting to look rather better value, isn't it? Look at brands outside the Stellantis group and it's a similar story. The equivalent Mini Cooper Electric would, on the face of it, require around £33,000 from you, but that's for a 40.7 kilowatt-hour base variant that'll only take you around 190 miles between charges. The 54.2 kilowatt-hour Mini Cooper SE that you'd need as a proper range comparison with this Fiat costs from around £33,500 as we filmed. So it is too with the rival Volvo EX30. The base 51 kilowatt-hour version of that Volvo was priced at around £34,000 as we filmed, but that variant only takes you 214 miles. To go further in an EX30, you'll need that car in extended range form. One of those will cost you the best part of £39,000. Even the budget buyer's champion in this segment, the MG4 EV, will save you hardly anything over an equivalent 600e if you get it in the long-range form that you'd have to match this Fiat's driving range. As for other options at this price point, well, the Mazda MX-30, you can pretty much discount that unless you're urban-based, because its £30,000 asking price only takes you a feeble 124 miles between charges. A much better option is the Smart #1, which in standard form can slightly better this Fiat's range, but that Smart will cost you over £32,000 in its cheapest form. Enough about alternatives to this Fiat in EV form. If your interest is in the 600 hybrid, that £24,000 starting price is about the same as a Mazda 2 hybrid, but fractionally above the class leader, Toyota's Yaris, and hybrid versions of the Peugeot 208 and the Vauxhall Corsa. You would save a bit more with the hybrid Renault Clio and a lot more with the MG3 Hybrid Plus. But you may be prepared to find that premium for this Fiat's cute looks, and it costs a lot less than a hybrid Honda Jazz. If, having considered all that, you decide that it is a Fiat 600 of some kind that you want, then you're going to need to know just how generous the Italian brand has been with the standard kit here. So let's take a look at that right now. Let's start with features common across all 600 models. There's LED headlamps and front turn indicators, LED fog lamps with a cornering function, auto headlamps and wipers, a glossy black shark fin antenna, and cruise control with an intelligent speed assistant, and that can be set to work with the standard traffic sign recognition system to make sure that you don't exceed the speed limit in urban areas. Inside there's a 7-inch fully digital instrument cluster, a 4-speaker audio system, upholstery and recycled fabric, and a steering wheel trimmed in synthetic leather. Media connectivity is taken care of by a 10.25-inch Uconnect central screen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Plus you get expected safety features like automatic emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, lane departure warning, and a lane keeping assistant and driver attention alert drowsy driver detection, as well as traction control, tyre pressure monitoring, and a full complement of airbags with an emergency call feature, and that will alert the emergency services with your GPS location if those airbags ever go off. There are a few differences between base trim for the EV and for the hybrid. Basically, the red branded EV gets less despite its substantial price premium. So a 600e red emblazoned with various red logos will come with 16-inch steel wheels with bi-colour covers, plus a red dashboard fascia and a red branded tunnel pad cover, along of course with an EV drive mode selector. And all 600Es get a heat pump to preserve your driving range in cold weather, and that's by drawing heat from the outside air to assist the climate system. A base 600 hybrid does a bit better for equipment than its EV counterpart. It features instead 17-inch diamond cut alloy wheels, exterior chrome accents, a body coloured dashboard fascia, bi-colour seat upholstery, a heated windscreen, heated front seats, a frameless auto dimming rear view mirror, and also manual air conditioning. Ideally with your 600 you'll want to stretch to the plusher La Prima spec we have here. That gets you 18-inch diamond cut alloy wheels, chrome bodywork accents and rear privacy glass. Plus there are front, rear and side parking sensors, an automatic high beam system for the headlights here, foldable and heated door mirrors with puddle lights. We've also got keyless entry, a power operated tailgate too, and a rear view camera with a 180-degree view. Fiat also builds in its autonomous drive level system 2, which gives you lane centering and works with the adaptive cruise control system. And that incorporates a stop and go function too. So if you come across a tailback, it'll automatically stop the car and then start it off again when the traffic starts moving. Inside with La Prima spec, there are synthetic leather ivory coloured seats with 6-way power adjustment and lumbar adjustment for the driver's chair, together with a massaging feature. You will also get a dashboard fascia in matte ivory, velour floor mats, a La Prima branded tunnel pad cover, an auto dimming frameless interior mirror. There's also a wireless charging mat and an upgraded 6-speaker audio system. Plus, there's also blind spot detection added to the safety tally. Whatever kind of 600 you decide on, you won't be able to order it in grey because Fiat has decided it will no longer make grey cars. Apparently the colour doesn't align with the new Dolce Vita philosophy, which is a brave move given that grey is the most popular colour for new cars in the UK. Make of that what you will. Base spec models can be had in red or for £500 extra in black or white. There is a much nicer colour choice if you stretch up to this La Prima spec though. This offers 4 trendily themed shades. This bright orange Sun of Italy hue is the only standard one. Alternatively, for £500 more, you can choose between Sea of Italy, which is green, Earth of Italy, which is a stone colour, or Sky of Italy, which is obviously blue. Fiat also wants £400 more for the Mode 2 AC 3.7 kilowatt 13 amp charging cable you'll need for those occasions when you have to charge this car from a domestic socket. For this 600e, we gave the range figure for the 54 kilowatt hour battery. 51 kilowatt hours of that is usable in our driving section, 254 miles. And as we pointed out in our market and model range section, that's a stat that can't be matched by base electric versions of rivals like Vauxhall's Corsa, Peugeot's 208, Volvo's EX30 and the MG4. So to match or beat this Fiat, you'd have to pay more to get all of those cars in bigger battery forms. Having said that, we should point out that in this test we've struggled to get much over 200 miles between charges. Now Fiat claims that this could rise to as much as 370 miles in urban driving conditions. Pleasingly, a heat pump is standard here to keep the engine figures up during particularly cold weather. Some competitors charge quite a lot more for that feature. To get anywhere near those quoted figures, you'll need to keep the car in its default or normal drive modes, neither of which deliver the full claimed 154 brake horsepower power output, but rather a lower figure of 107 bhp. You'll also need to frequently engage the gearbox's provided B designated regenerative braking setting, and keep an eye on the Charge Eco power meter at the top of the instrument screen. Energy efficiency is rated at 5 miles per kilowatt hour, a readout for that consumption being part of the data that you'll get from a useful trip summary that springs up in the instrument screen when you power off at the end of the journey. It also shows you, incidentally, the remaining battery percentage and range, plus your distance travelled and time taken. If you want more detail on consumption, the central screen's energy menu has a statistics section that graphically shows you your consumption in kilowatt hour per 100 kilometre since the start of your journey over the last 30, 60 or 120 minutes. That energy section also has a power flow meter, although all it really shows is whether your foot is on the throttle or not. There's also a screen for presetting your charging times. Yes, battery replenishment, let's get on to that. Now, as usual with the modern EV, customers can order an RFID card for DC public charging, during which the battery can recharge at up to 100 kilowatts. That is a pretty modest figure by class standards. Arrival Smart number 1 can charge it up to 150 kilowatts, although because this Fiat only has a 54 kilowatt hour battery compared to the Smart's 66 kilowatt hour unit, the charge times are similar. To be specific, a 20 to 80% public charge is possible in 27 minutes when you're hooked up to a suitably rapid charger. Just 3 minutes on a fast charger like that would add 80 miles of range. What about AC home charging? Well, with a typical 7.4 kilowatt wall box, a full charge will take 7.5 hours. If you have the kind of 3-phase supply that will allow you to have an 11 kilowatt wall box at home, then a full recharge would take 5 hours 45 minutes. Using a feebler 3.7 kilowatt supply, you'll need 16 hours 10 minutes. Whatever your approach, charging this EV at home will be quite a bit more affordable than choosing the hybrid version and filling it up with petrol. At the time of making this film, the current average electricity rate was 30p per kilowatt hour, and that would mean an AC charging spend of around £15 to top up a 600e from empty to full. Bear in mind that using a DC rapid public charger will be much more expensive. 10 to 80% on one of those will charge a customer around £30. If you can't face the thought of constant charging, then you might want to look at the 600 hybrid model instead, which Fiat reckons will run on battery power for up to half the time during urban travel. It's rated at up to 57.6 miles per gallon and up to 114 grams per kilometre of CO2, which for some reason isn't quite as good as you'll get from this same engine in slightly larger Stellantis Group family hatchbacks like the Citroën C4 or the Vauxhall Astra. To give us some broad hybrid family hatch segment perspective beyond Stellantis, let's tell you that a Toyota Corolla manages up to 62.8 miles per gallon and up to 102 grams per kilometre. All 600 models are covered by a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty, and there's also 36 months of breakdown cover included in the price as well. If you do have a problem on a journey, then you can use the Uconnect infotainment system to contact roadside assistance. Benefit in kind taxation for the 600e is, as with all EVs, rated at just 2%, although that will be reviewed in 2025, as will the 3 EV exemption for VED road tax and for the congestion charge in London and the ULEZ zone 2. What else might you need to know? Well, you do tend to suffer a bit from depreciation with Fiats, and that's rather the case here. After 3 years and 36,000 miles of use, a 600e retains between 39 and 41% of its original value. To give you a comparison point there, this model's similarly engineered Stellantis cousin, the Jeep Avenger, manages 51 to 53%. You might save a little with insurance over some small EVs though. Insurance groups for the 600e span 25 and 26. Arrival Smart #1 is rated between groups 31 to 38. For the 600 hybrid, it's group 26 or 27. Servicing intervals for all 600s are every year or 12,000 miles, whichever comes around first. Owners can keep up to date with their car's maintenance schedule via the My Car section of the My eCharge Fiat app, which briefs you on the time of your next service and also on various maintenance issues. This is Fiat's third attempt to supersize the little 500. The 500L of 2012 was poor, the 500X of 2014 was better, and this 600 perhaps gets visually closest to replicating that classic little city car's sense of urban chic. The 600 badge hasn't been seen on a Fiat since production of the little Seicento ended back in 2010. Now that car wasn't really fit for small families, but this one might be. It really is the 500 all grown up. As we've been saying, the drive experience isn't very much like that of a 500. Perhaps that was too much to expect, but if you like the pretty looks, you probably won't care too much about that. Were we spending our money right here, right now, we'd probably lean towards the hybrid version of this car rather than this 600e EV. But things might change if Fiat gets around to giving this car faster charging speeds and longer battery range later in the production cycle. Whatever your preferred powertrain, you could complain that under the skin, this is merely a Jeep Avenger in a trendier, Turin-tailored suit. But potential customers probably won't care too much about that either. But Fiat is at last back in the B segment with a credible market offering. Now, it's taken the EV revolution and a lot of Stellantis Group help to get it there, but if you like the brand and you have a fashion-orientated preference for your choice of small hatch, you may just feel here that the wait's been worth it.